Hey everybody, KC here. So today's episode in my continuing series of conversations with industry luminaries to celebrate Morning Newsbeat's 20th anniversary is with Steve Smith, who is the president and CEO of LL Bean. Now listen, Steve wasn't always with LL Bean. In fact, 20 years ago, he was with Hannaford Brothers, working for Delhaize. And that's one of the things we talk about in our conversation. And since then, after he left Delhaize, he went to work for Walmart and worked all over the world. And then now he finds himself back in Maine, working for LL Bean as its president and CEO. And it was a really interesting conversation. We talked a little bit about how during the pandemic, LL Bean would not have been considered an essential business. And yet, during the pandemic, the products and services that LL Bean offered were more essential than ever. We talk a little bit about the fragility of a great brand. And I thought that was really, really interesting. How companies have to be really conscious of the fact that a brand's reputation is fragile. You have to nurture it and continue to grow it. And finally, I asked him, okay, you came from the food industry, now you work for LL Bean, but if you were going to come back to the food industry, what are the lessons that you've learned while at LL Bean that you would bring back to it? I thought it was a terrific conversation. Steve Smith's one of my favorite people, really, really smart. And I love having smart people on Morning Newsbeat. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Steve Smith, president and CEO of LL Bean. Steve Smith, welcome to Morning Newsbeat.
Kevin, great to see you.
Especially because I am wearing an LL Bean shirt.
Always appreciated.
And I would say probably 90% of the time when I'm doing Morning Newsbeat, I always think to myself, well, if Steve is watching, he's going to know that I'm wearing his product. So
I do. I keep track.
So since we're sort of, I'm building these sort of around the idea that Morning Newsbeat is now 20 years old. I'm curious, 20 years ago, what were you doing?
What, 2001?
Would have been right after 9/11.
Yeah, exactly. So living in Cape Elizabeth, Maine, had just had my first daughter. We were pregnant with our second daughter. I was working at Hannaford. I was director of marketing in 01. I had been there for 2 years. No, I was just joining Hannaford actually right at that moment. As a director of marketing.
What I like to call the Ron Hodge School of Retailing, right?
100%. Ron was CEO when I joined. And I mean, this was the heyday of Hannaford. I mean, Shelley Broader was there, Mark Dwyman was there, Kathy Green was there, Steve Campbell, Beth Newlands Campbell, Todd Pepin. I mean, just like amazing leaders and
27 Yankees.
yeah. And I was just low. I was just a low director. I was director and then a VP and then SVPs right. And then Ron.
So, well, I didn't realize that's where you were 20 years ago. You've had quite the 20 years since then.
I have.
I mean, you've been all over between moving around within Hannaford and then spending a lot of time abroad with Walmart.
I mean, those 20 years, that is the retail part of my career. I was marketing and media before that. And that was Maine, Florida, Belgium, Southern China, England, Shanghai, Yarmouth, Maine in those 20 years. Completely
circular.
Yes.
Wow. So that's the last 20 years. In some ways, I would imagine the last 20 months have had to create as many challenges for you, just in terms of the pandemic, as perhaps you saw in the 20 years previous.
Yeah. I mean, the 2020 and 2021, and obviously pandemic, as well as George Floyd and the events around racial justice and social equality and all, for any leader was just an absolute life-defining, career-defining moments, of leading through crisis. Obviously public health and trying to make sure that our employees and our customers were safe, the environments people were shopping in were safe, managing financially, not knowing exactly what was going to happen. And then all the way through to, the very well documented supply chain challenges that are happening now. Throw in a very controversial election that occurred in 2020. So, I mean, really just fascinating time to lead and run a business. And it's been I'm a student of retail like you. I like to learn and study, and it's been an amazing learning process. So many interesting lessons to metabolize to make us stronger, make us better.
So much, it's become sort of this truism in the supermarket industry that the last 18 to 20 months saw as much acceleration, certainly in terms of innovation and technology, as propelled them 3, 4, 5 years into the future beyond where they would have thought they would be at this point. Now, at LL Bean, in the categories that you're in, did you, or in the segment that you're in, did you see the same kind of acceleration? Were things changing as quickly as they were in the food business?
Yeah, I mean, different for sure. I mean, we are an e-commerce business. We're 70% of our sales are direct, and then 25% are retail, and the remaining is international. And so, channel-wise, e-com accelerated. Obviously, stores were closed for 10 weeks, and then traffic was down 50% for all of 2020. 21's been fantastic, but 20 was crazy. But so channel shift, the things that we were doing accelerated, absolutely. One of your favorite topics, innovation, it absolutely forced customer-driven technology innovation, like buy online, ship from store, buy online, pick up in store, curbside pickup. Customers were unsure on where to get their products and where would it be the safest. So lots of innovation around that. And then our categories ended up being absolutely in line with the American psyche for these past 2 years. And, Bean brand is phenomenal and has been for 100 years, and the products have been spectacular. We landed in this sweet spot all around, indoor comfort and outdoor connections. And so people were staying at home, they were jazzing up their homes, they were pushing out into the backyard, outdoor furniture, cleaning up their homes. They wanted to be comfortable inside. We're all used to seeing everybody from here up, but from here down is sweatpants and comfortable clothes and slippers. So we were right in line with that. And then people really truly engaged with the outdoors in a powerful new way. And in the outdoor industry, all of the work, all the research that was done through 2021, there are millions and millions of new outdoor enthusiasts, and they are reconnecting with nature simply, walking your dog, going out in your backyard. But this was a pretty important psychological moment for the country to sort of step back and look at where are your priorities and where are you getting energy. And so that reconnection with the outdoors is right in line with our purpose and our purpose. And I've talked about this before. I mean, it's to inspire and enable people to experience the restorative power of being outside. And that's our stated purpose. And it was like that before the pandemic. But that restorative power of being outside was really magical and continues to be magical. And it's driving sales. I mean, people are going outside and they're buying hiking boots and anoraks and jackets and outdoor gear. And I can hit you with all kinds of cool product stats, but it's been wild.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, the word essential got thrown around a lot, right? And in the sense that supermarkets were suddenly seen as essential, and supermarket workers were seen as essential, and the products they were selling were seen as essential. Now, while your physical stores were not seen as essential, you as a brand and the products that you sell, I guess in a lot of ways, you were probably more essential than you may have ever been. I mean, just because of the moment in which we found ourselves.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think I hated the essential, non-essential label because we were non-essential. But I believe we were essential for mental and physical health for sure. And our products, they do that. We also, and it's the story that we talked about in 2020, but we had some incredible innovation from inside our organization where we converted our manufacturing, where we make our boots, our boat and totes, and our dog beds into making masks for the Maine medical community. we used our supply chain to procure 2 million masks for the Maine healthcare systems. We converted a part of our distribution center to be able to receive, unpack, and repack food for the Good Shepherd Food Bank here in Maine. So we actually provided a lot of essential services using the infrastructure that we had to help the community get through the early stages of the pandemic.
And if my recollection is correct, you did that pretty much on a dime. I mean, those conversions you did that very quickly.
Totally. We received an email it was the Thursday. So the 13th, on March 16th was the first day of work at home. We said on the 13th, Friday the 13th, said, everybody, when you go home, bring your laptop because we may not come back to the office for a couple of weeks. And then on that Thursday, the 19th, got an email from somebody in our manufacturing saying, hey, I think our dog bed liner might be a suitable fabric for masks. And that was on a Thursday. They had prototypes on Saturday. We had them tested over the weekend, and we were making 5,000 per shift in 2 shifts starting the following Monday. It was amazing, totally remarkable.
What does that say about the way you have innovation kind of inculcated in your culture? I mean, that's an extraordinary story. But I think it must illustrate something larger about, first of all, the ability of somebody to pick up the phone or send you an email and say, I think we could do this. And then to be able to move so quickly from concept to product. And is there a lesson there that can be applied to making other things that, that are more in line with how we live our everyday lives, or will once this thing is over?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, one of the things for us that bean culture has always suffered from is, and I never get the expression perfectly right, but perfect is the enemy of good. And so when you're trying to do something new, you really do try to figure out every single exception and understand every piece that needs to be done. And typical innovation, you've got a concept and you work that concept, and then you do a pilot, and then you've got a rollout plan, and you've got your milestones, and you've got all kinds of decision-making criteria that you have to hit to keep moving forward. What happened in the pandemic for everybody, and this is not unique to LB, and these are, across retail, I think was really spectacular. You had incomplete and imperfect data, but you had to act, whether it's in the safety for your employees, safety for your customers, productivity of the business, that with that imperfect or incomplete data, you had to be decisive. Mm-hmm. And if you froze, there just wasn't an opportunity to freeze. And we had an expression that actually my wife had read somewhere at the beginning of the pandemic that we then used as a strategy, which was what feels extreme today may feel inadequate tomorrow. Right. And we said early on, we will make as many tough decisions as we can early, so we never get into place 6 months from now where we say, I wish we had cut more inventory or saved more cash or done X, Y, or Z. And so that forced us to make decisions really quickly, and that forced innovation, and it moved us out of our normal innovation rhythm. And you look at our work from home, I mean, I told you the example, the dates are real. On the 13th, we sent everybody home of March, and on the 16th,
2020. Right.
In 2020. And on the 16th, we started work from home with Microsoft Teams. We had never used Microsoft Teams before that weekend. If we were going to roll out Microsoft Teams as our new remote working tool, it'd be a 2-year process with multiple pilots. We'd have super users. We'd have all kinds of testing. Right. And everybody did it. I mean, everybody went to Zoom and Google Hangout. And so I think so many businesses got a lot more confidence and courage in being willing to make bigger shifts and changes to be innovative.
Well, listen, we all would have bought Zoom stock 2 years ago had we had any idea what was going to happen. Well, and I think that speaks to something that I guess I talk a fair amount about on Morning Newsbeat, which is the idea that if you don't think about one of the reasons people were able to innovate so quickly is because they didn't think of it as innovation, right? They thought of it as survival.
Totally.
And then the question then becomes, how do you, and I would imagine this is something you think about when things get back to, I hate the phrase normal, but some semblance of reality, of a reality where we're not all worried about getting sick. Do you have to work to, for lack of a better term, institutionalize that mindset culturally within the company? Or do you think, I mean, is it just, I mean, I can't imagine you could just let it say, oh, okay, we got it now. We don't have to continue to nurture that to make sure people, then people want to think about the next great boot innovation the same way they thought about, and maybe boots are a bad example, but the way they thought about the mask innovation, which is just try it, see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, for sure. We've spent so much time as a leadership team, and then we actually talk about it really openly with the entire organization at town hall meetings and that is continue to document the lessons that you are living right now and metabolize them, talk about them so that we can try to build them into our future focused culture. And so, it's amazing actually with the democratization of like working on teams, meetings, we have more people in meetings. We're more transparent. We're more collaborative, weirdly, because we can have 40 people in a meeting, whereas we can only get 12 in that particular conference room if we had scheduled that meeting. And so thinking about those lessons that have made us more productive, more efficient, quicker to market, we are constantly talking about, and all hands meetings, which are sort of department level meetings on what is working, and then how do we continue to build that in and reinforce that. And now we're in year 2 now. So, I mean, we're out of the wartime mode. I mean, it still feels a bit wartime like, because we're working from home and the pandemic is still here, but 2020 everything was pure reactive. 21 is, what are all the things that worked in 20? And let's start to repeat them and build them into our culture. And that democratization of like more people involved, we're trying to just keep decision making more distributed in the organization because that's giving us speed. And we've had to have trust to say, look, we're moving 1,000,000 miles an hour. So many things are shifting and changing. If you're empowered to go, you understand the strategy, you understand the parameters, so just go and metabolize those lessons and build them into our culture as we move forward.
Yeah. It is interesting, I think that, and I think it's going to be fascinating to see how companies sort of adjust. I mean, I've had some experience now over the last few months because speeches have started to come back. So I've started to go to different meetings and things like that. And I have found, and it's interesting because when you sit around a table with people at a conference, people talk about the fact that this is the first time they've been sitting around the table at a conference, right?
Right.
And so the general feeling I get from talking to people is that they really like Zoom, Teams, whatever technology they happen to be using. They like those for meetings because they tend to keep things, first of all, they can have more people, but they also tend to keep the subjects pretty focused.
Totally.
Right? It's very targeted. But what they do enjoy about getting back together is it allows for digressions.
Mm-hmm.
And digressions can lead to creativity, right? Because you just start asking questions and, oh, I did this at home, I did this, and then, oh, maybe is there an idea? However it works. And so it's going to be interesting to see how companies going forward figure out how do we maintain the focus in a way that's productive and efficient, but allow for the digressions of the more casual creativity that can come out of people actually getting together.
I totally agree. And we hear the exact same thing. And there is no substitute for popping in and out of offices, having, hallway conversations, being in a meeting where one thing builds to another. And we absolutely miss that for sure. It's interesting. We have, and it sounds weird and fabricated, but it's not anymore. Like we've set sort of a new cultural norm with our Microsoft Teams meetings where we allow banter to go. And actually, like in our officer group meeting or our directors meetings, like the first 5 minutes on the agenda, it says banter. And it's just giving everybody permission to be not in the topic. Because as you said earlier, like if I wanted to stop in someone's office and give them an idea, which is a 1 minute thing, now I have to schedule a 15-minute Teams meeting and then talk about that topic. So we go into these Teams meetings, we have a topic, just like you said, we're highly focused. But if we back up and we just say, let's just talk and be open for a while, it does simulate, we bounce all over the place and little ideas pop and people connect things. And we also have said, look, if you start off on a tangent in one of these meetings, let it go. Like, don't snap it right back. Let it meander around a little bit. I'll tell you the funniest thing that we've had is we've had a couple of in-person meetings. My executive team, which is I have 8 direct reports. So there's 9 of us. And then Sean, who's our exec chair, we're all together, 10 of us. And we meet a lot, and we started to do some in-person meetings. And the funny thing is we're so used to when we're done, you just click leave and you're out and you're on to your next thing. And when you're physically together, you're like, all right, are we done? Like, can we get out of here? Let's go. We've sort of lost the grace of, how do you exit from a conversation? We're just ready to hit a button and go.
Delete. Yeah. Delete means something entirely different.
Yeah.
In those circumstances. So a friend of mine did want, when I mentioned to a friend of mine, I was talking to you, and he wanted me to ask you, this is sort of a broad question, but it was as we record this, it was because he had read a story that I wrote today, which was now how Kmart's down to 6 stores, right? The slow death continues.
Incredible.
And he said, ask Steve, how does LL Bean avoid being Sears? How do you avoid being Kmart or Montgomery Ward, or pick the name of any retailer that has sort of buckled under its own, weight, and sometimes it's the weight of its own self-importance. How has your company managed to stay, vibrant and relative and resonant to people, and avoid that sort of the problems that have plagued so many retailers?
It's a great question. I have no problem differentiating us from Sears, Kmart, Montgomery, whatever. And the first answer is, we are a brand, and we have been a brand, and we have been a differentiated brand since LL himself created the boot. And so it's a brand that is built on values, on purpose. We're incredibly clear about our purpose. I think being family owned, and now being into our 5th and soon to be 6th generation of family members, keeps us very clear on what our mission is, what our stakeholder philosophy is, focusing on employees, customers, our shareholders, our suppliers, the environment, and the community. And then,
by the way, just so you know, my response to him was, I think the first reason LL Bean is different is because I don't think they allow private equity into Freeport, Maine. I just think
right. They just stopped at the border.
They stop them at the border and say, no, go away.
That's part of I think that's part of the family ownership part, right? Of, we have long-term stability and real clarity on what our purpose and mission is around getting people outside. But those 3 examples, there's a difference on, if you're a retailer, but you're full of other brands, you're at the whim of those other brands. Whereas for a brand like LL Bean, the LL Bean channels only sell LL Bean products, and LL Bean products are only available in LL Bean channels. Now, we're just getting into wholesaling, where we're starting to push our brand into other retail environments, but we control our brand. We control our customer experience. We control our product experience. And so, that it adds expense, it adds complexity, but it allows us to continually innovate and be relevant for our customer base, and to find new customers, because we are creating those products and then we are presenting them in our own channels.
So you have a licensing deal or however it's structured with a retailer who's going to have an LL Bean section, like Nordstrom, I think is one, right?
Correct.
They're going to do it now, or Zappos,
Correct.
right? So how do you assure that my customer experience, if I happen to buy your product through them, is going to be as strong as it is when I bought this shirt by going on your website?
So we chose those two. So we just launched our wholesaling in 2020, and only with 4 partners. And those two, we chose Nordstrom. One, there's a family ownership, family control, comfort. They are second to us, or maybe first to us, as good in customer service as we are, and it is deeply rooted in their DNA. And so we wanted to work with somebody who we knew respected the customer and the customer environment as much as we did. And they wanted to work, they had as much reverence for our brand as we have for their brand. So there was a mutual connection for the fragility and the value of our brands. And then the same is true with Zappos. Zappos is very careful with the brands that they present and how they present them in their environment. Different, it's not customer service environment, but the customer experience environment is done very carefully. And they are very careful about protecting their brands, making sure that we're able to communicate our brand story the way we want. And we've been really careful with the partners that we're working with. And it's part of our test.
I think that word you just used, fragility, is really important. And I don't think enough retailers think about the fragility of their brands, that they take for granted their customer base, their well, we've been in this neighborhood forever, whatever it happens to be, and don't realize that you could lose that customer in a minute. I mean, and you have to sort of act like that, and it's paranoia, but that's the good kind of paranoia.
Absolutely. I mean, I use that word really intentionally. I mean, just for that reason, like your brand reputation and why people choose your brand, it's fragile. And your reputation, there's that adage of like reputation can be ruined in a second, but built in years, or whatever that is. I mean, it's incredibly true. And the adage, I mean, it's an LL Bean thing, and it's all the best retailers of focus on your customer. Don't take your eye off of your customer, and don't let your customer take their eyes off of you. Continually, to your earlier point, innovate, be relevant, listen to where they are. We talk about innovation on customers want to buy things in different channels. So you have to be innovating with different channels and with different products. And all of that is keeping your brand healthy, not taking anything for granted at any moment.
So in that sense, just in terms of what you've described in terms of the LL Bean brand and the value proposition, I mean, that is very specific to the company where you are, and different than the really good companies that you worked at before. So if you were going to go back into this may be an unfair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If you were going to go back into the food industry, I guess I would have 2 questions. One is, what are the lessons that you've learned from LL Bean that you would apply to if you went back to work for a retailer in the supermarket food, mass industry, that you think are not only are applicable, but could be applied in the sense that you can get your hands around it? And then, having said that, having answered that question, your notion about LL Bean sells LL Bean stuff, right? You're in control of the entire customer experience, from manufacturer to order to delivery, the whole thing. And at the end of the day, most supermarkets, there are very few that aren't selling 40,000 different items made up of 5,000 different brand names, or whatever the number happens to be. What kind of store could you even go to, because you would never have the kind of control you have now? And so that if anybody on the board of directors of LL Bean is listening, I'm not pitching him on a job. I don't know anything, but it just occurs to me that your experience there is both, in some ways, maybe so applicable and then so unapplicable
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? If unapplicable is a word.
Yeah. So it's a great question, and it's a brutal question. So I sort of on the spot, what comes to my mind is the first lesson from LL Bean that I think is massive is just be incredibly clear about your purpose, your reason for being. And when we did our purpose work, originally it was to inspire and enable people to be outside, to get outside. But then the better question was why outside? And that's what led us to experience the restorative power of being outside. That clarity of purpose then transcends into our products, our outdoor discovery programming, our how we train our retail employees to be talking about restorative power, being outdoors. That clarity at the top of purpose, purpose, mission, vision, I would bring to any retailer to be incredibly clear about what is your greater purpose. So that is something I think highly translatable. I do think the LL Bean products and LL Bean channels, that is, it's the ultimate private label strategy. And
it's like Trader Joe's in some ways.
Well, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, the people who are doing it are Trader Joe's, Aldi, and then you can look at a lot of really
and Stu Leonard's, and that's
Stu Leonard's, exactly. Stu Leonard's one of the first
right.
to do that. And that's a model that works. And you can see the best supermarket retailers, I'd hold Hannaford up there, and a lot of the Delays brands, and Walmart as well, either buying or building proprietary brands or private brands so that they are controlling the customer experience, the eating experience, or the opening of the packaging experience. I do think that those things are translatable. So those are the quick answers I would say that would be spending time on.
Well, I didn't mean to ask you a brutal question. So,
no, it's great. It's an awesome question.
I'm asking everybody this as part of this series. So I'm assuming, like everybody else, you streamed stuff at home in terms of TV shows, movies, things like that during the last 20 months. What did you get addicted to? What was your binge pleasure, if you will?
I mean, best series of the past 18 months for me, Ted Lasso.
I was absolutely sure you were a Ted Lasso guy.
Off the charts.
Yeah.
So smart and optimistic and fun and deep. You cry, you laugh. I mean, it's really just spectacular. And at the very beginning of the pandemic, The Last Dance, which was the ESPN series about the 1996 Bulls season, I was glued to that, and that was a weekly release. It was every Sunday night or whatever, and that was spectacular. And then I'm a Succession, Billions. Can't wait for Ozark to come back out. So
I love Billions. I've not watched Succession, and I feel like I should, because if I like Billions, I think I'm going to love Succession.
You will.
Yeah. Okay. The part of the reason I asked that question, though, is I'm absolutely persuaded that what happened during the 20 months of the pandemic, and how people like you and me and everybody we know just got addicted to watching stuff at home and watching movies, and that it's going to change that industry forever. Right? There will still be movies that people may go to in the theater, but they're going to be Bond movies or Star Trek movies or Star Wars movies or Marvel movies. But so much more is going to be coming into our houses, because we got used to the idea of being able to sit on our own couches, stop it to go get a beer, stop it to go to the men's room, whatever it happens to be. And it just changed consumption habits. And I'm absolutely persuaded that it's exactly the same thing that is going to, over the long term, it's why people are going to change the way they shop. You've always been largely ordering, whether it was through the catalog and now online, but especially in the food business, I think that's going to continue. It's got to continue to grow, because people are just going to say, I'd much rather the thing where it doesn't matter, I'm going to shop online. Where it does matter, I'm happy to go to a store. But I want to use that time to go for a walk, take my dog for a walk, go with my wife, play with the kids, whatever it happens, all the things that they're going to use your products for. I think that there's a straight through line in terms of consumer behavior that the food industry really has to pay more. even more attention to than they have.
I agree. I think you had a statement on Morning Newsbeat either today or yesterday, but 50% of all customers have shopped online for food or something. There's something, the penetration is now up to half. It's the same adage. You have to be where customers are. Right. And technology is changing what customers expect. And it's not linear comparisons. It's not this supermarket's doing this, so this supermarket needs to do that. It is, this customer is experiencing this technology through this app. It might be Sonos, or it might be their online banking app, or it might be Pinterest. And what they're experiencing there, they're translating that in some way to another customer experience. And so as an organization, you need to be scanning what are all the things that are changing your customers' habits, and then how does that translate into your customer experience? And I'm actually really pleased and amazed by what the supermarket industry has done through COVID, specifically on curbside and shopping on your app and picking up at the store and having home delivery. Like, you have to be where your customers expect you to be. And your interfaces need to be close to, they don't have to be industry leading, but they need to be close to what customers are experiencing in other uses of similar technology. And I agree with you. So many things were accelerated or changed during COVID that that pace of change is going to continue at warp speed.
Well, listen, you have been incredibly generous with your time. I really appreciate it. I'm a huge fan of you and your company. As like I said, anybody who watches my wardrobe changes from day to day would know. And I really appreciate you doing this. And I look forward to staying in touch and talking again sometime soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. And I love what you do. Morning Newsbeat is the daily read. Your insights your culling of important information is your superpower. And then your quips and anecdotes and insights are the added value on top of that. And it's great. So it's really fun to be here with you, and I appreciate everything you do.
Well, thanks. Take care. Talk soon. See ya.
All right.
Bye-bye.